Hi everyone, welcome. I'm Laura Nicola. I'm your faithful therapist. Thank you for joining me. Today's video is going to be talking about grief. So I have 4 tips on how to manage symptoms of grief, and I hope you find it helpful. 2020 has been a rough year for a lot of people, and there's been a lot of loss associated with it. Now, grief is not just the loss of a person. It certainly could be, but there's also a lot of other losses that a lot of people are experiencing. There's been loss of job or income. There's been loss of relationship or a marriage. There's been loss of what seems normal. There's been loss of missing out on opportunities to connect with friends and family in certain ways. There's been a lot of grief in 2020. And so hopefully these 4 tips are helpful. It's hard because grief is one of those things that everybody experiences in a very different way. And this doesn't feel very comfortable to us. We want to know how to grieve appropriately. We want to be, socially acceptable. We want it, to be something that doesn't make anybody else uncomfortable. And there's a stigma that goes with grief. How do I express my grief without, harming somebody else? Or how do I share that, this loss meant something to me without making somebody else sad? And so grief it's hard to cope with, but it's important to go through, because if we don't actually accept that we're grieving and we don't allow ourselves to feel that, then we actually harm ourselves more than if we felt the grief. So again, hopefully these 4 tips are helpful. The first is to identify the feelings that you're actually feeling. This sounds really simple, but it's actually a little bit harder than we might think. When we think of grief, we think of, oftentimes the 5 stages of grief. But there's a lot more that encompasses the feelings that would go along with grief. There could be anger, there could be denial, there could be depression, there could be mourning, there could be sadness, there could be loneliness. I could go on and on with the different feelings that are accompanied by grief. And so just being able to identify that and label it in a mindful way of just saying, what am I feeling right now, is the first step. Second step is to accept those feelings. This is hard. This does not mean that I'm okay with how I feel. It doesn't mean that I want to feel this way forever. Certainly not. Because nobody wants to feel all of these, negative emotions that come with grief. But accepting them means that I allow myself to acknowledge that what I lost or who I lost was important to me. And in a way, that's actually really helpful, because it's acknowledging what that person meant to me, or what I lost, what that meant to me. So identifying the feelings and accepting them is really helpful. The third is to express your feelings. This is where a lot of people feel uncomfortable. They don't want to, express their feelings of sadness or loneliness or depression or anything, because it feels uncomfortable sharing that with other people. But if we grant ourselves permission to actually express how we're feeling, then there's that identification. There's also the acceptance. But it also kind of allows us to process in an external way. So when we're grieving at home alone, it's really isolating, and it's lonely, and it feels like what we're going through is going to last forever. But that's not the case when we express it. Expression of the emotion is basically what people do in therapy. And that's why it's, so therapeutic, because they're getting out what they feel from within themselves, and they're expressing it in a way that kind of gets it out of their heads. It's kind of similar to, an expression through journaling, for example. That would be another way to express how you're feeling, is to write a journal, to the person that's gone, to, keep a journal about the different emotions that you're feeling. It could be a lot of different ways that you express it, but it's really important to do that. And finally, to share the feelings. This is, kind of taking it one step further and sharing it with somebody else. I think when people experience grief in the sense of losing a person, it feels really private, and people don't really want to share their feelings or thoughts on the deceased. But I highly encourage that you share with other people what you're feeling. Share stories about the person that you've lost. Talk about them. Don't act like they didn't exist. That feels uncomfortable too. So try challenging yourself to share those feelings. And there's nothing to feel embarrassed by. I've had people say, oh, I can't, allow myself to share that emotion. I can't cry in front of somebody. I can't show them that I'm hurting. Why not? Sharing that creates a sense of vulnerability, and it allows the other person on the receiving end of our story to empathize with us and to understand us and to really connect with us. And that's what we're called to be. I mean, we're called to be in community, so why would it be any different when we're grieving? We should be grieving as a community. So these are the 4 steps that they might seem simple, but trust me, when they're put into practice, they're hard, but so helpful and productive, I hope, anyways. So I'm, as with all my other videos, I'll be highly interested in, how you connect with this. I'll be curious, if these steps work, if you've tried them, if any of them you get stuck on. So please leave me comments. I will be very interested to read them. Also, please subscribe if you haven't. I really appreciate all the subscriptions here on YouTube. Also, follow me on Instagram and Facebook. I added a Facebook recently, so please join me on both of those platforms to get just additional information, additional tips, insights, all of that. So thank you so much for being here, and I wish you the best in dealing with your grief. Okay, take care.